IKEA is one of our franchise retail business, and it is a separate business format for the group. And we are doing this in our own terms, meaning that we can have decision and we can have our own ways on how to manage our business. And linking towards the cloud, actually it is, let's face it, it's really imperative for everybody in the business that we have to move on towards the cloud because of the fact that the consumerizations as well as the availability of the technologies and the tools that 10, 20 years ago are actually limiting the capability. And the geographical presence of our businesses is actually requires us to adopt the cloud. And also the cost consciousness of running a business is always there. So in order for us to find a better way is actually to find another solution that can actually be able to create and provide services in a cost-effective manner. And that's what I'm doing and what I'm planning as I'm doing a cloud journey. I call it cloud journey because it's not as simple as you do it one time. Because you need to do a lot of preparations. In fact, you have to define your data policy. You have to make a mindset and transformative approaches. In fact, I'm changing the definition of my department where every executive meeting and our monthly meeting, I put it as innovative and transformative department. It's not anymore information and technology. It's all about innovation and transformation. It's putting an influence to the business decision makers that this is the way to do in order for us to be more effective in dealing with the consumerization and also the thinning profit that we're having because of the competition. So in order for us to compete, we have to have a mindset of a change within the organization, and changing that aspect will actually help the business in order to survive and be sustainable. That's my thought about it.
Thank you, Jojo. We'll definitely come back to that question of the governance, how to stimulate this transformation and change. As you mentioned, it's all about the change aspect of it. But for that, you need strong sponsors, and you need also to put upfront some budgets. And the question is, how do you push this budget through? How can you sort of say present in a convincing manner the journey you're talking about, the cloud? Because many of them do not want to touch a system that works. You still need to do a lot of backward integration. You're changing the way people work, so all these future, let's say, requirements you put on the organization are not easy typically to do. And I'd like to get your perspective.
I think to add to a point Karim what you just said is, it's what you can do differently that you cannot do in the current infrastructure. That will drive adoption of cloud. There are certain things that as an organization like IKEA could do better once they move into cloud, which they could not do in the traditional infrastructure. And that innovation and transformation is what's going to drive all organizations towards cloud. So that's the key, to find out what additional efficiency that you can bring in using cloud as infrastructure. Once you got that, it's not about what I was doing yesterday, I want to do the same thing tomorrow. It's about what you can do additional to bring in efficiency. And once you got the sweet spots, it's easy to probably even get the whole organization behind you and get sponsors to really move towards it.
But you're touching a very interesting point here. So what you're saying is about this transformation, not necessarily starting with the big bang, but starting with the additional value you can create. And obviously, your suggestion, if I hear you well, a hybrid model, saying keep certain aspects as they are, and let us start with something that is really innovative, showing clearly the value add, and then slowly but surely you will start to replace other, so to say, aspects that are running on your legacy. Is that the approach?
Precisely. And probably, if you take it a realistic term, take an example. Let's say any organization has got multiple branches and they're going to open up new branches. Every time you open a new branch, next time, you don't have any of the physical APVX or any of the things. You can host all of those infrastructure at the back end in the cloud, and then you can do certain things which you couldn't have done had you bought a PBX or even a soft IPVX in your premises to do that. So let's say video conferencing, voice conferencing, all of that goes back hosted as a cloud services from your central location to all your new branches. So that's the way you're bringing in new values to your organization as you expand.
Any other experiences from you on that? How you basically stimulate the change by introducing the cloud for a certain area of your business?
Yeah, basically the introduction is quite difficult, especially when you are running a very old and big organization. It is actually the biggest challenge of every executive, IT executive. It doesn't mean that you are good or bad, but it's all about the culture of the organization. But preparing the organization, and as I said, it is a journey between the business and the IT. So you have to create that landscape in order for you to have the selling point.
Could you elaborate more exactly when you say preparing for the audience, or to say how you build that up?
Yeah, let me continue on that, because the reason why I'm pointing and embarking into that point is actually the biggest impact is actually in the IT itself. It's not in the business. Because you're actually making change within your IT organization in order for you to walk the journey, because the business will never know what are you doing. In fact, it's actually transforming your team from a traditional back-end specialist and traditional IT into frontliners, where they can actually be a business consultants or an internal specialist to guide the business leaders and the business users.
I'm actually seeing a lot of the adoption happen just the reverse. I'm seeing business units who understand their business are actually finding the cloud applications that meet their needs, and they're going around IT.
And that's the problem. And that's where the problem is, and that's what we need to avoid. Otherwise, you have to eliminate IT within your organization.
But it's very difficult. I mean, I tend to agree with Jim. It's very difficult to change the mindset of the IT in every company. So
that's exactly the point. That's why adopting a cloud is not an easy, as in everybody is just talking about cloud. Cloud is not always a blue sky. Cloud could be a gray, and at any given time, the rain will pour. You know, when it pours, you know, when it pours, it really means that you may be walking out the door because you have proper umbrella and you don't have protection. What I'm saying here is that in order for you to have a buy-in of the cloud, you have to do it slowly and in small steps. Like what we're doing. We try to do the project management first to the cloud. We move our collaboration to the cloud. So you are actually doing it, and then when people are experiencing there's no interruption, the concern of business is only interruptions and any delays. In fact, I changed my SLA. My Tier 1 SLA is actually 15 minutes. Uptime and availability. The rest of the environment I have is 30 minutes.
But how do you kick off this project? Because the existing CIO, the last thing would be is to change fundamentally the way he's been working for the last 50 years, right? Yeah. So is it when you change the CIO that you bring, let's say, your thoughts in and start to make the change? Or all of a sudden you go to a conference like that and you discover cloud and you go back and say, let us do it now? What's the igniter?
That's often the best solution. Changing the CIO.
No, actually, it's not.
No, but this is.
I hope we have enough CIOs here. Eventually, you can switch from one company to the other.
But that's where the discussion of where having the conflict within the organization is, because you don't necessarily change the people within the organization, but be able to transform and create a mindset within the organization in order to embrace the new technology.
But how do you start that? That's my question.
I think this is like a deja vu. You know what? 10 years ago, IT outsourcing was a bad word. A lot of CIOs were scared to death that the whole IT department is going to go away completely because of this outsourcing. So tomorrow, I'm not going to own any of the assets. None of these computers belongs to me anymore. It belongs to somebody else, and we pay a quarterly bill for meeting a SLA. And the IT departments really went into smaller pieces. And what happened in those cases, the IT department transformed themselves to more of a consultant for the business, saying how you extract best value from those IT outsourcing companies to deliver to them. So in a way, I agree with Jojo what saying you need to be transformative, but at the same time, as I hear from Jojo, I see the resistance of saying, okay, I don't want to be in cloud, I want to just take a slow step. Now, if I go and take Jim's point, it is more of the business saying, I can drive down cost. At the end of the day, we are here to make money. And that is what the business goals are. Business will obviously try to push towards cloud. The question is how quickly the IT departments for a large organization can adopt to that and really make the best of it. Because it's going to happen at the end, at some point in time in any organization whatsoever. Because a simple thing, business are there to make money. If there is a means by which I can cut down my cost, business will adopt that. Now the question of is how IT sort of adapts itself to really being the transformative force in it, rather than being the one holding back the organizations behind it. And this exactly goes back, the whole outsourcing phenomenon happened 10 years ago, and we are past that stage, and we've seen a lot of this large conglomerates where there's still IT department exists, and the CIOs is more of a business consultant. It's telling them, how do I get IBM or at HP to deliver the business efficiency that I need for my business to run?
Yeah. So, as a CIO and a person who networks with a lot of different CIOs, I've made a few observations. There are fundamentally two types of CIOs when I observe my friends. There is the business type, who's there for a strategic reason, and is actually looking for driving business value, using information. They're a purveyor of information, and they're driving business value with this information. Then there's the other type that is very technology specific. Okay, there is a type that has a particular skill sets, like for example in healthcare, this is the type that you need currently in healthcare. Very technical skill sets to solve very technical problems. And there are different times, different cycles in the market where we bash the different types. Sometimes you don't have you can't write code, you're not a proper CIO, you don't have the hybrid, you don't have the experience from the past, you didn't come from the technical side. Then there are other times like the seasons we're in now where you bash the technical CIOs and say CIO ultimately needs to be a business unit. We need to reinvent the role of the CIO. There are different cycles that we go through. And in different industries at different times you need the different type of CIO. In those CIOs that are very technical and innovative, because of the commoditization of IT, what they need to do is move towards becoming CTOs, right? Move towards innovation and driving the use of technology for innovation in the business. The other types fundamentally become more of COOs, CEOs, drive business value, and when the IT has become easy to do, when we are past the learning curve, we can then apply that IP to the business and grow the business. But if you are a CIO and all you do is worry about driving down costs, that's a sign of a dying career, right? Because ultimately we should be on the front lines of innovation and making very big differences to the business and industries that we're in.
Well, I think that cloud is definitely separating the good CIOs from the bad CIOs, the ones that are absolutely focused on the business transformation versus the server huggers and the cost people. And we've seen this movie before. If you're old enough and you remember how PCs came into the enterprise, it's unfolding the exact same way. So the mainframe was a constrained resource, and business units needed compute power, and so they got home computers. They weren't even called PCs, and they became personal computers when IBM realized they could sell them to the enterprise. So people bought a lot of PCs so they could get the compute power, and they started networking them in LANs. And then what happened? It got out of control for marketing or anyone else to manage their own computer network. And then what used to be called EDP, they became IT, and it all became centralized again. So now they're going out, business units are going procuring cloud applications, software as a service, and they go get 10 different applications because IT, the bad IT is not being responsive enough, but there's this great opportunity for IT to come back in as this white knight and help them integrate. The biggest thing that the IT visionaries, from an enablement standpoint, I think just in a very practical term, is to create that identity dial tone so that enterprises can say, oh, you want to go do Salesforce, you want to go do this, here's how we can federate the identity, and you can go do that just like this. And not only can IT support it, but we're actually going to make it even better experience because it's going to be single sign-on, it's going to be all that. So that's the way it's going to unfold. It's exactly like it's done before. But unfortunately, if you're a server hugger and you're looking at, you know, amortization of IT assets, you're not going to get that, and you will be looking for a new job.
I think we need to move on to the next topic, but I think one of the key takeaways, ladies and gentlemen, as you could hear from the panel, is not so much to assess and audit your security standards or assess the performance of the infrastructure you have or the business needs. I think you may have guessed what you have to assess. You have to audit, actually, the capability of your CIO. Is he rather a CIO as innovation? Or is he kind of a CIO, the classical IT, or eventually moving forward as a COO, managing operation, creating value? Is that the conclusion of the first part of the, do you agree, gentlemen? Do you find yourself there?
Karim, let me add a very important note on that before we move on, because the most important element of doing this thing is to make sure your IT leader or your CIO be effective, that the organization allows him to report directly to the CEO so that he is aligned with the business strategy and business objectives. If you put down your CIO behind, with the functional leaders, behind the functional leaders have their own agenda. So the priority is being deprived when you are wanted to do something. Mm-hmm. But if you are sitting side by side with the functional leaders and with the CEO, you can echo all your roadmaps and your directions, and you can actually make an influence because you are sitting every meeting, every executive meeting, and you can make an influence to that. And that's what is the most important thing to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving to the next part of the panel. I'd like to focus on your future requirements. But before that, eventually we can keep the panel a bit longer, from 10:20 to eventually 6 p.m., and scan the capabilities of some of the CIOs in the room. So we need the auditing committee. How many CIOs are in the room eventually, just to get a feeling? CIO? I think they don't want to raise their hands.
No, they don't want to answer now.
All right, so let's move on to the next session. I'd like to start with the requirement. Is there any immediate pressing question from your side? Okay, we're obviously answering all the expectation of the audience. So let's move on. Now, you learned some lessons, you tried it already, etc. What are the next steps? What are the key, so to say, issues you're facing and the expectation you have in terms of requirement for the future when it comes to cloud?
I think what is next step is for you to get ready. In fact, you should be clear on what would be your vision towards the future. Because if you don't know what you want to do in the future, then you're not able to identify and design your environment towards, let's say if you're embracing cloud, you have to make sure that you know what kind of level of maturity you are going towards it. Because there are certain levels of it's not just jumping to the cloud and you have all the parachute. It's not. It's actually different levels and layers of clouds that you have to adopt. Because if you are, it's the readiness and also having the roadmap in order for you to be successful and to avoid pitfalls, as well as to minimize the risk.
You just mentioned a few elements, I would call them ingredient for your vision. Yeah. Can you just materialize it a bit for the audience? What in 3 years from now, so to say, how can you give us an example of a vision?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I started in small steps, and then I'm still in the stage that my infrastructure is still on premise. eventually I have to remove all my infrastructure outside my premise because Hong Kong as a place to do business is very expensive. And that's my small 1 square foot means a lot for my business. If I can take it away in a most cost-effective way that I'm running IT environment, that makes sense.
So,
And the business that is going towards geographical presence, I can reach them by having cloud as my time to market. You know, if you adopt cloud, the time to market is much more faster than what you have in your own premise because you have a lot of insecurities in terms of your people, in terms of your skills, in terms of many factors.
So if I compare to some of the visions we're doing with our clients, for instance, zero paperless company,
Yes.
everything digital in 3 years, which means a lot. If you think of the number of fax machine, printers you have in every company, if you count them, we talk about hundreds of thousands, if not, right?
Yeah.
So driving this vision is a huge transformation because you actually changing, there is no paper in the company anymore. So what you're saying, your vision is, for instance, one ingredient of the vision is to say 0 square foot of computer power in your company.
Yes, because the providers are already done their work, and I'm willing to join with them because I don't have to worry with my security because I cannot hire expensive security and data analysts and and data scientists, and this is not my core of business. If I'm running an IT company, my perspective is different. But I'm running a retail business, so that's why it's always subjective to your business. You have to understand what is your business, what is your focus, and what is your core of business. Otherwise, you're just making an experiment, an expensive experiment that may cost a business a significant, impact, and you may be walking away from the door. And
I like it very much. It's quite radical. I'm not sure that many companies have have achieved this thought in terms of vision.
because if you transform the financial calculation should not be based on ROI.
Yes.
You should be. I'm changing it in the sense that it should be ROVI. It
That
is
is very-
the return of value of investment. It should not be transformed. It should not be translated into the amount of money that you can get. That is a wrong basis of judgment. That's my personal opinion.
So another key takeaway, ladies and gentlemen, you have to add the V, the value.
It should be
Absolutely.
ROVI. It's not ROI.
Excellent. All right, let's move on. Any other long-term future thoughts and requirements you put in your company after the first, let's say, experiments you have done?
Well, I think that what you're going to see is a real common SLA. I think we're going to see a lot more SLAs that need to mirror what we see out in public cloud. And I was with a very large chip maker last week who's doing, I think, a precursor for what we're going to see 3 years for a lot of other companies. They've moved a typical IT project from 6 months to 15 minutes. And that's because they're all self-serve and they're providing that ability to provision things. I think that's going to be very necessary. It's going to mean that, the BPR, business process reengineering, a lot of those things are a lot more automated, and we're leveraging a lot of other of that network effect, that cloud effect.
Jim, I'd like to challenge a bit that with all the additional complexity we're getting in our business, let's say bring your own device, virtualization, individual solution you're making, etc., security standards increasing every day. So how can you, on the one hand, reduce dramatically, so to say, the delivery capability and increasing the SLI, or reducing the SLI depending on what you look at, cost versus time, and at the same time manage this upcoming additional complexity?
Because when we have a utility, compute utility, that's the accumulation of the contributions of a lot of different developers and a lot of different companies, the actual parts you're responsible for are a lot different. And you are not building a house from scratch. You're putting together a prefabricated house, which already has all the vetted components that are there, so you can do things a lot quicker. And you're building on what's already been trusted and other things. You don't write your own encryption algorithms. You use something that's already developed.
Actually, you don't have to be worried with BYOD because that is your enabler later on. That is the tool that you will be needing in order for you to maximize the usage of the cloud. Because those devices, your users are actually helping the company to reduce costs if they are willing to share their devices.
I agree, yes, definitely.
Let me just get a show of hands. How many of your organization actually allows BOID today?
BYOD?
5%?
It's probably less than that. And probably the reason is the fear of security.
Yes.
Of what devices you bring in. With that, how securely you access the corporate data is still a fear factor, and it's not gone away. No matter what development in technology has been, it's like an ATM machine where you go and withdraw money. In the beginning, people are still reluctant to go to ATM machine, withdraw money, and still stand in the queue in the banking counter too. So it takes time. So as technology evolves, you'll see people will take time to really sort of get used to it and start realizing, okay, it's pretty safe for allowing my employees to bring in any device that they want and access corporate data securely and safely. And as you see the technology changes, like probably the examples on the mobile devices, BlackBerry, the new one, which actually even allow to do a toggle between the two personality of the security modes of being a home phone and a business phone, are probably the steps towards where the mobile devices are going today, of how secure devices are going to and how we can switch between the modes for giving organizations that confidence that BOID is something is okay rather than being scared of.
If you would ask the question, though, how many of you have BYOD that's unsupported, everybody should raise their hand, because everybody has it. It's a question of whether or not you acknowledge it.
I think, talking about vision, Gautam, so we have like 5%. If you come back in 3 years at the same conference, how many you would expect to have BOID?
It should be all.
All.
And that's a good question. As I said again, it's going back to that example of how easy for us to get used to the development technologies, giving us that security sense of, it's safe for us to really use our iPad or Android tablet from our employees who brings in there, and as long as I have some of the apps to take care of what goes out, is secure, encrypted, and thereby I don't really care of what's going to happen on the leak. So that adaptation is not going to happen in 3 years' time, I'm afraid.
We have to send Giorgio to evangelize all the companies, but I don't think that in 3 years he will achieve that vision of free. Because it's a change, you said it yourself, it's about a change management process, and many companies are not even thinking about that today.
True. Yeah, it's really an everyday effort that you have to influence the organization. So that's why even in your talking, and it's all about making it always repetitive in order for them to absorb and avoid the fear. It's all about fear of what they're reading and all these speculations. But in order for you to counter-attack that, you have to be ready. And you have to share to I will borrow your Revis presentation of transparency. It's very important that you have to be transparent. And you have to tell the organization that you cannot secure everything 100%, no matter how much we invest. Even we invest 1 billion, 2 billion, it doesn't matter.
I mean, the people leaving the company are the most unsecure, so to say, element. These are the biggest leaks typically you have.
In fact, I told them that the biggest risk actually is IT, especially myself. That's what I'm telling my organization.
Back to the human factor.
Yeah, the biggest risk is me. It's the IT.
We have 5 minutes, so Leon, you wanted to mention something on that, and we'll take eventually 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
I think if you look at the trend of, back to BYOD, if you look at the trend of the amount of hardware platforms that are created, new categories, the iPad was a new category. Now we've got the glasses. After this will be the flexible watch that's coming out, right? And then we have overlays and augmented reality that's becoming a fact of life. We have smart TVs. The amount of different ways that we interact with computing, coupled by the fact that all the applications are moving onto the cloud, and you use your new Microsoft products or your Apple products, and all your information flows across from one device to another. I think you have to expect, if you are running an enterprise IT, you have to expect that BYD is a fact of life. That people are going to be interacting with their applications on so many different platforms. It's impossible for you to provision so many devices.
And if you talk about the 20 billions or 100 billions coming up devices, they need to be connected somehow in the network, and you cannot control that.
So
So-
ubiquitous computing
Yes.
will be what we are talking about in the next few years, rather than BYOD. That's
The,
going
the
to be
challenge
accepted.
is actually the obsolescence. It's not about the speed of development and the technology progression. What is the imminent, the most high risk is actually the obsolescence. That's why you have to minimize the impact of obsolescence, because the fast development, the rapid development of technologies, including devices, you will be subjected to an obsolescence if you keep on embracing servers and everything, and you will be limited into that.
One comment I'd like to make, you mentioned a lot of requirements and change in the industry, but one element you have not covered, and I wonder why. We talked about the, say, all the kind of services, security, data storage, all the stuff, including the devices, but none of you mentioned the network effect. Today, we see a three-step evolution. We used to be in a culture of download. That is, iTunes, you mentioned music, so you download when you have capacity and you take your stuff with you. Now we are migrating very fast to a new business model, which is about streaming. So you need the network availability all the time to stream. And we see the third, let's say, step of evolution of the network is the augmented intelligence in that network. Depending what, so to say, you stream and what time and who you are, you may get different quality of service. None of you mentioned this as a requirement.
No, I'll go into that, because based on the discussion point, because we have to remember that the cloud doesn't stop into three areas only: PAS, SaaS, and IaaS. In fact, the next generation of cloud is network as a service.
Absolutely.
This is what we will be needing, because this is the bottleneck.
Fine.
In order for you to be effective and in order for you to enjoy the promise of cloud, is to have this last component, which is the network as a service, where you can have cloud bursting, where you can have inter-cloud. I remember there was a question earlier on how you can transfer the data from US to Asia or from Europe because of the time dimension. You can do that. You can have inter-cloud.
I 100% subscribe to that. Are you ready to pay for it?
It depends. Yeah, it depends. It's about cost. But it's now happening, because the
Depends on the
submarine
roaming.
cable has been developed already for if you notice, the 5 countries hosted the new submarine cable in order to host the 40 capacity. It is available now in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines.
I'm not
so on.
talking about the transport layer only. I'm talking about the users as well, having their own devices. And each device would require different bandwidth, whether you're using a smartphone or using a tablet, where you are in a medical
some
center.
kind of tiered internet.
Exactly. I'm talking about quality of experience, quality of service, bandwidth on demand, and also the augmented intelligence I was talking about in the network that identifies, is it a doctor that is on a critical surgery, or is the doctor uploading some, let's say, patient data that can be done the next day because it's part of a, so to say, storage process, you know?
That's
what I'm
actually
talking
the
about.
point, is you need to have an internet routing protocol in order for you to do that. The streaming and those different things are actually available. You can actually segregate the voice, the video,
Yes.
and you can do prioritization. It is already available. It's not
Technically,
new.
yes. In terms of business model, I'm talking about business model.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you are ready to, because if you ask, let's say, if I'm a telco or a cloud service provider, typically, and I want to differentiate the broadband access for you, you say, no, I take the classical service, why should I pay more? Are you today
I'm paying now.
rethinking that?
I'm paying now.
You're paying now.
I'm paying separately for because what you need is convenience and also the success factor.
I'm fine. So you're all agreeing that this is a huge requirement in the future?
There's no free lunch.
We're re-architecting applications, and I mean, Akamai is a good example of how we're going to see a lot of difference in how content gets distributed. And I mean, we have as corporate members in CSA very interesting security as a service companies that actually are able to meter a lot of this and actually able to reduce your telco, your bandwidth costs, and it's a transparent
And
user.
that's where technologies like dedupe comes in, where instead of sending
The packet.
the same packets, you probably sort of make it back to optimize. An example of that is if you're an organization and actually sending the list of holidays for the year, right? And you send a PDF file from HR to all the employees. There's 100 employees. There are 100 PDF goes into the mailboxes. But in a dedupe mechanism, what I do is I send only one physical file and 99 pointers. So that's one way of showing how you reduce what you
Discipline.
use in a bandwidth. So as technology sort of evolves, you see how compressed you are able to manage your data when you send across the bandwidth also becomes a huge technology. But to all of that, I think that the other thing probably goes behind is the storage that gets added. As you see all these devices people start bringing in, you have to think about all those devices needs to be served, which means there are going to be more and more storage at the back end. Somebody has to provide that. Either it's the IT department or is it the cloud service provider.
Not in Hong Kong, I understand.
Yeah, but somebody needs to really cater to that. And I think there was a research done by Intel where it shows every 600 smartphones, needs a server and a storage at the back end. Every 122 tablets needs a server. So you basically see a huge explosion of storage that's going to happen as you see BYOD and all those things that's come in place.
Unfortunately, I have to finish the panel. I would love to continue to discuss about the net neutrality in terms of providing the service. Can you charge more as a cloud service provider? This is another huge topic, but unfortunately we'll not cover it in this session. Any question from the audience? There is one question over there, please. We take one more and then we finish.
Thank you. Omid here from Asia Cloud Computing Association. The bring your own device thing actually contributes to another problem that Symantec calls rogue clouds, where there's different divisions within an enterprise use different cloud solutions that are not interconnected and are talking. So clearly we're talking about a governance problem from an enterprise perspective. How would you, panelists, go about keeping that governance framework updated to be able to keep up with those cloud services that are coming up on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I think you've answered the question because it actually is a governance problem, right? And we often speak of it as a technical problem when it isn't. Because if you were back in the paper days and you were storing bits of information in another cabinet, and you didn't know that you have information there, right? And you didn't have this communication to say, I've got some information here and some information there, and it wasn't interoperable, it would be a problem of management ultimately.
Thank you.
And I think to some extent what Jojo was saying, how the IT department becomes the interface when the business department starts going and procuring the services. Let's say, for example, expense management is not a core function for any organization today. So that could be the first thing people think of. Can I get outsourced as a cloud service? People like Concur and others does it, right? Now when I do that, now as an employee, if I have to remember all those username, password, every single application that comes, the cloud service is difficult. And that's what Jim's point is. How conveniently you mash them all together like a single sign-on, so it's transparently for the users to go and use it, is what the governance factor of the IT department will come in getting all those cloud services integrated.
Gentlemen, we said that we have to be disciplined in doing cloud business. We have to be disciplined as well in finishing the panel on time. So I'd like to thank you very much. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give them a hand. I think they did a great job.
Thank you.